So hi everyone, nice to meet you all. I'm glad you could join us. First of all, I just wanted to introduce ourselves. So we're from the University of Cambridge and we're from the Chemical Engineering and Biotechnology department. So we have a lot of students that work with us in our department, and we also have a lot of research students and scientists as well. And we all work from a wide range of scientific backgrounds. So we work on projects looking from how the body works to medicine, to helping the environment, and even things like making robots. So just to introduce myself, I'm Sarah, and I'm a first year research student at the department. And in my group, again, we all have a range of different scientific expertise. And my specific project involves looking at how the body can protect itself, and specifically how these organs, such as the brain, the lungs, and the gut, can protect itself from harm, and how we can help to keep it healthy as well. So today I want to talk to you about the brain, as it's a really exciting and important organ inside of our bodies. So first of all, what is the brain? So the brain is a wrinkly organ that sits inside our head, and it weighs about 1.5 kilos. And this is the same as a big bag of flour. It's also really energy hungry, and it consumes about 20% of the energy that you intake from food every day. And that's the same as about 5 apples a day. So that's a lot of energy that your brain needs. So how does the brain talk to the rest of our bodies, and how does it really work? So it talks to the rest of our bodies through tiny messenger networks, and it's powered by electricity, just like the computer or your iPad at home. The brain controls everything we do, and it's always active, even when we're sleeping. Now, the brain is made up of tiny living structures called cells. And in the brain, these cells are called neurons. And they're very long and thin and have a star-shaped structure at the top, where they can send electrical signals to other cells in the brain. And this is how it talks to us. Now, these neurons are so very small that there are 86 billion neurons inside our brain. And just to think about how many that really is, if we stretch them all out in one long line, one in front of the other, they would reach from here to Brazil. So that's a really long way. And that just shows how many of these can fit inside our brain. So what parts are there to the brain? There are 3 main parts. We have the brainstem, which is at the base of the brain. And we have the cerebellum, which is like the mini brain. And this connects the brainstem to the cortex. And the cortex is the largest part of our brain that sits on top. So what do these structures do? So the brainstem, as I mentioned, this connects the brain to the rest of our body through the spinal cord. And this is really important for controlling essential things like our heart rate, our breathing, and our digestion. The cerebellum, so the mini brain. This is really important for things like balance. So when we're doing things like cartwheels and gymnastics, for coordination, and for also speech. And finally, the cortex, the largest part of our brain. This is really big in humans when we compare this to other animals. And this is important for things like solving problems, like when you're going to school and working, for our emotions, memory, and thoughts, and also for our creativity. So now we've gone over the basic parts of the brain. I wanted to ask you a question, and if you could type into the chat function in this group, I wanted to ask you what you think could go wrong with the brain. And if you look at these images here, you can get some ideas about what you think might go wrong. So what do you see in these images? Have you ever felt sad or stressed? What does that feel like to you? So I'll just give you a little moment now to type into your chat function, and then we can see what ideas you come up with. Okay, so let's move on now. So I think if any of you have any other comments, just put them in the chat now. And if not, we'll just discuss about what we think might go wrong. Okay, so in these images, you can see this person might be feeling quite tired or low. And maybe this person feels quite down, or this person might feel quite confused. So some things that can go, or some things that might change in the brain could be to do with our mood and our emotions. So sometimes we might feel quite low and sad. Other times we might feel quite panicky or anxious. And other times we can feel like we have a lot of energy and can't really sit still. So these are some of the things that might change within our brain. Other things that might occur is when the brain could be damaged, or over time, as we get older, we could lose parts of our brain as well. And this could lead to things like being forgetful or losing our memory. Maybe our speech might be a bit off when we find it struggle to say how we feel. And also sometimes we can feel quite dizzy, or we might fall over a bit more often. So now we've had a look at things which could go wrong. Now I wanted you to think about what makes you feel good and what makes you feel happy. So again, I'll just give you a little while to type into the chat function. I just want you to have a think about these things which make you feel good and happy and energetic. And then again, we'll see how that can help our brain. Maybe see as well what you can see in these images. They might help you come up with a few ideas. I'll just give you 15 more seconds now just to type anything that you might come up with. Okay, and then we'll just move on now. And we'll just have a look at some of the ideas which we could do to help keep our brain nice and healthy. So things such as having a nice balanced diet and eating a wide range of things, as you can see here. Things like keeping our brain active, so solving problems, or going to school, doing puzzles. Being social, which I know right now could be a little bit challenging, but even online, staying in touch with our friends and playing with our friends, that can really help us to feel good. Importantly, getting a good night's sleep, because this is when our brain is most active and helps it to recover and repair. And keeping active and keeping our body healthy can also make our mind feel much better. And then finally, keeping our brain protected as well. So when you go for a cycle ride or going on your scooter, make sure you always wear a helmet. And then finally, I just wanted to sum up. So make sure we just have everything in moderation. So all of these things that we've mentioned to keep our brain nice and healthy, that they take an equal portion of our lives and everyday activities. As if we overdo one thing and ignore the rest, then this could make our brain a bit imbalanced. So that ends my summary here for the brain, and then I think I'm going to hand over to Anthony now.
Hello, everyone. I'm a colleague of Sarah's. After her fantastic talk, I am going to talk a bit about something different. I will tell you the story of microbes in our body, why they're important for our health, and what we can do to protect them. So let me introduce myself. As I said, my name is Anthi, and I'm a PhD student here in Cambridge. This means that I'm working as a scientist in a big lab. More specifically, I'm trying to build mini organs like our gut. We can use these miniature organs to study the human body and its mechanisms and to answer important questions for our health. In the lab, I work a lot with the microbiome, which is the community of all different microbes that live in and on our bodies. Now, I want you to tell me, what are microbes? What do you think they are? Can you please type your answers in the chat? You can probably get a few ideas from this image here. Microbes are tiny organisms that come in many shapes and many sizes, and most of them are so small that cannot be seen with the human eye. Now, who studies microbes? The answer is a scientist, a researcher. What do you think a scientist does? Probably you have parents who are scientists, or relatives or friends of families who are scientists. So a scientist is someone who always asks questions. A scientist is someone who works very carefully, who writes everything down, who observes patterns around them in the lab, in nature, in their house. And through this observation, they get creative thinking and they come up with new ideas. They use their imagination and try to answer big questions about the world we live in. So we are a big group of scientists around the world studying microbes in different ways, and it's very important for all of us to work together as a team so we can discover new things. To study microbes, though, as we said, they're very, very tiny, so we need tools. And one of the tools we use a lot is this here that we call a microscope. And a microscope helps us to see these tiny organisms, these microbes that otherwise with the naked eye we cannot observe. Has any of you seen a microscope? Maybe you have a small one in your houses or in your school. It would be really cool to ask your parents for one, or your teachers. But let me ask you now, do you think all microbes are good? The answer is some of the microbes, most of the microbes are good, and the microbes naturally found in our body are very helpful for us. For example, they help us digest our food and get all the good nutrients that keep us strong and healthy. They also protect us from other microbes that can be harmful for our health. So some microbes are bad, and we call these microbes that can harm our body pathogens. For example, when we have high fever, or we cough and we sneeze, when we get the flu, or when we have tummy upsets, it means that a pathogen has entered our body. And because some microbes are bad, it is very important to stop them from spreading. And we can do that by washing our hands more often, and also by using tissues when we sneeze and cover our mouths when we cough. This way we can protect ourselves, but we can also protect others around us from getting sick. Another question you might be wondering, where can we find microbes? Since they are so tiny and so small, we cannot see them in our eye with our naked eyes. How do we know where they are? Well, microbes can be found everywhere. As we said, they live in and on our bodies. We can find them in the food we eat. We can find them in our gardens. And of course, we can find them on our pets. So microbes are everywhere. What can we do, though, to mine these microbes that reside in and on our body? And where exactly on our body can we find them? We can find them mostly on our skin. We can find them in our mouth and in our nose. We can find them in the stomach, but the biggest community of microbes resides in our gut, in our small and large intestine. And as we mentioned, from our gut, they help us digest our food. Most of these good microbes in the gut, we call them bacteria, and they're very, very important for us because they help us absorb all the nutrients from the food we eat. They also use the food we eat to produce more nutrients for us. And they also protect us from pathogens, from bad bacteria. They are there to fight the pathogens and make sure that they don't enter our body. So this is why we have to take care of them. And we can take care of them by eating a lot of healthy food, such as vegetables and fruits and fibers, by exercising and interacting a lot with nature and our peers. So how does a healthy diet look? What is a healthy diet for minding our microbes? To do that, as we said, we have to eat a lot of vegetables and fruits and healthy proteins and stay active. And it is maybe now a good idea that you have a thought of how much vegetables and fruits do you eat? Do you prefer to eat that, or do you prefer to eat something else? And you can think of some examples, and if you want, you can type them in the chat. I'm going to show you now, I'm going to introduce you to the food pyramid. And the food pyramid shows us what a healthy diet looks like. In the base of the pyramid, we have the types of food we must eat daily and in large portions. And these are fruits and vegetables. And then whole meal cereals and rice and pasta. Sorry for that. In the middle of the pyramid, we have milk, yogurt, and cheese, so all dairy. And above that, we have eggs and meat and fish and beans and nuts. In this middle part of the pyramid, which is narrower, we have all these types of foods that we must eat daily, but not in large portions, maybe 2 to 3 servings per day. And then in the top part of the pyramid, which is the narrowest, we see that it is suggested for a healthy diet to consume less spreads and oils and not eat everyday foods and beverages that contain a lot of sugar and a lot of salts. It is advised that we eat them in slow amounts. And here are some suggestions as to how many servings per day we should consume for a healthy diet. And it is very important to keep track of what we eat, because a healthy diet is essential for a healthy life, and of course a healthy microbiome, healthy microbes in our body that will protect us from pathogens, help us digest our food, help us get all the nutrients we need, and stay strong and healthy, of course. If you want to find more information about microbes, if you want to play a fun game or maybe be a microbiome hero, you can visit all these resources here. Thank you all for joining us. It was nice giving this presentation to you. And now we will move to our next speaker, Dr. Liliana Fruck.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Auntie and Sarah, who are working with me in the same department, but they're doing more of a biology and biochemistry, and I am chemist. And if I am not in the lab, then I am usually in my kitchen. So right now I am talking to you from my kitchen. And as a chemist, I do lots of different reactions. So chemists usually do lots of fun experiments. Some of them can be a little bit explosive. And I would like to hear from you, what do you think chemists are doing? So in order to actually show you what I do also in my research, I will also have, I prepared an experiment that I will do here. And I'll show you this a little bit later. And Auntie was talking to you about microbes and how many interesting things they are doing. and how important it is to keep a very healthy microbes in our body. And these microbes, they are special because they do lots of chemical reactions. So if we eat lots of carrots and we eat lots of broccoli, they will be able to extract very important molecules from the carrot and a broccoli, the molecules which are very important for keeping us healthy and to keep our brain going. Because as Sarah told you, 20%, a huge amount of energy from the food that we are eating is going to the proper functioning of our brain. And in order to actually extract these special and very nutritious molecules that we need, they need to do lots of chemical reactions. So microbes have special tiny chemists within their cells that are doing many chemical reactions. Some of them we can't even do in the lab, but some of them we can. And I prepared one of these reactions, which is done with a special tiny organism that you might have also in your kitchen. And this organism is called yeast. So yeast is something that we use to make bread. And it's a tiny living organism that can do lots of reactions when we mix it with the flour and we add a little bit of sugar to it. It will do all of the interesting chemistry. So I have a little bit of yeast here, which I bought in the shop. So it comes in a very small sachet. And then I put it in a little bit of a vessel. And I will mix this yeast with a bit of warm water, because we need water for lots of chemistry. And particularly in our body, our cells are full of water, and many of the chemical reactions that are happening in these cells need water to be sped up. So yeast is full of little chemists, which are called enzymes. So basically, when you eat a little bit of fruit, and I have an apricot here, if I bite the apricot now, and I'll do this, I'll demonstrate. It's really delicious, and it's sugary. I will chew it, and as I chew it, there will be chemical reactions happening with the help of molecules, which are called enzymes. So yeast is full of enzymes as well. And I'm waking these enzymes up now by adding a little bit of warm water. The next thing which I'm going to do, I have a clear liquid here in this bottle. And this liquid is very similar to water, but it's not. It has an extra atom. And this makes it a little bit more reactive, and it makes it very nice for the enzymes from yeast to react with. So I will put a little bit of this liquid into the bottle like this. So we have this liquid here, and I will mix it a little bit with a color, because we would like to see this reaction really to be a little bit more visible. So I'm mixing up with a color, otherwise everything will be just white and it's not going to be so nice to see. So I'm basically putting a food for yeast into my bottles. And then I would like to see what happens when I add this yeast together with the food. Does it happen something? Can I see the chemical reaction actually happening? I will need to put this a little bit aside. So I will put it in here, because maybe this chemical reaction will be really explosive. Maybe something really nice is going to happen. Maybe I didn't mix it in the right amount, so nothing will happen. But let me see. And now when I'm looking at the yeast, I see little bubbles forming. And that means that yeast is happy and alive, and all of the molecules are now ready to do the reactions. So what will happen if I add the yeast to my solution, which I prepared? Okay, let me put it in. Wow. So there is something really bubbling here. And it's bubbling, bubbling, bubbling. Whoa. And it's coming up. And what is happening actually is the reaction. And now when I touch this bottle and it's foaming, I can really feel it's warm. And that means that the molecule of enzyme, our little molecular chemist, has dissolved the solution that I put into the bottle, and there is a reaction happening. Let me see in another bottle. So I put a little bit of a red liquid inside, and I have my yeast here. And let me see if this is going to also do the reaction. And there is some bubbling happening, and there is a liquid growing, and it's coming, and wow, coming out. So now it's really bubbling. So the reaction will go on. So as chemists, we actually use this little molecular chemist to help us to produce many things that we use in our life. So for example, when you go to the school and you have maybe a piece of paper to write on, there are some enzymes, some molecular chemists that have been used to make this paper. Or even when we wash our clothes, we have tiny little grains of these enzymes that are helping us to dissolve all the dirt in our clothes as well. So we have these little helpers that are helping us to do many different reactions. So what is actually happening in this, and I drew a little bit of a reaction here. So we do have a white solution which I put in the bottle. And it has 4 different pieces of this if I would write it as a molecule. So it has 4 different atoms. And atoms are little components that make our molecules. And when I add my molecular chemist into this solution, what happens is this molecular chemists help us to degrade these molecules into smaller pieces, and we can see the reaction. The same process happens in our body continuously. So when I eat my apricot or I eat any kind of food, I have enzymes in my mouth that will help us to degrade different kinds of things. So how can we use these enzymes for example, in the lab? So I work with a team of scientists, and what we try to do is we take these enzymes and we study them. They're very small, so we need to use special microscope. Not the one that Auntie was telling you about to see the microbes, but even more sensitive microscopes, because these tiny chemists are very small. And then when we see these chemists, we try to understand how do they work, what kind of food they need for their own reactions, what kind of conditions they would like to have. Do they need to be warm up? Do they maybe like cold? Do we need to add something maybe a little bit sour to them so that they work nicely? Every tiny little molecular chemist in our body will maybe require slightly different conditions. And so we try to understand how they work. And then when we understand how they work, we try to extract the important parts from them. And we try to make them suitable for some of the important chemical reactions that help us make things like clothing or maybe some cleaning products as well. What I would like to know from you, I would like to know, what do you think, what else chemists are doing? So we do lots of different things. Sometimes we also make some drugs. We can also make your clothes. We can also do some interesting explosive things in the lab. But I would like to know if you have any questions, what else can we actually do? And I would also like Auntie now, if she can join me a little bit and tell me a little bit about microbes and enzymes that she used to work with, for example.
Hi, Liliana. Thank you for an amazing presentation. We both work with microbes, that is true. Microbes that I work with that can be found in our body can secrete very different enzymes. For example, from the top of my head, maybe not an enzyme, but these microbes use our food and they produce some small molecules that we called short chain fatty acids. For example, these short chain fatty acids can protect us from pathogens. They can create an environment in the gut that prevents bad microbes from invading. They can travel through our blood to other parts of the body, like the brain that Sarah was talking about, and they can give signals to the brain. And then the brain can respond back and send other signals to the gut. And through these signals, communicate with these microbes and perhaps make them produce other enzymes or vitamins like vitamin K. Some microbes produce, like bacillus, produce a lot of vitamin K, which we cannot always get from food. They also produce other tiny molecules that are very, very important that our body cannot produce itself. It doesn't have the information to make these enzymes and break down high fibers. Fibers are indigestible without these good bacteria.
Yes. So this is exactly what the yeast is doing as well when we are baking a bread. So you start with flour, you start with a little bit of water, you add a little bit of sugar into the mix and a little bit of yeast. And the yeast starts to do all of these beautiful reactions. So it's basically cleaving big molecules which are in the flour. They're really big and we can't really do anything with them. It's breaking them into the small pieces. And in this process of breaking up these molecules, there is also a little bit of gas which is produced. So if you have ever seen, and I know that Antti has seen, but if you have ever seen bread, if you cut it, you will see it's not a really compact structure. It has some bubbles within. And since I am in the kitchen, I do have a little bit of bread here. So you can see these bubbles in the bread. And these bubbles are actually consequence of the gas which was released during the reaction of the yeast with some of the big molecules which are present in the flour. So all of these processes have been known to humans for thousands of years, but they wouldn't be possible if we didn't have these small microorganisms. So they are extremely important for our body as well, and for the way how we digest food, how we make food, how we preserve food. Because if I leave, for example, if I leave this apricot on my table for a little bit longer, if I leave it for 2 days, I don't put it in the fridge or I don't eat it, I might see that there will be kind of brown patches forming on the skin of this apricot. And these brown patches are also consequence of the reactions which happen with the tiny molecular chemists, enzymes. So basically these enzymes and microbes which are on the skin of the apricot will change the structure of some of the molecules in the skin. So it's better that I eat it now when it doesn't get very dark. And you know, Antti, I think it's a kind of interesting also, and that's why we need lots of young scientists in the science as well, that although the enzymes and microbes have been around with us as long as the humanity exists.
They were here before us.
Yeah,
they
will be, exactly.
The environment possible for us to come to Earth and exist. Yeah.
Yes, and I mean, and they were there before us, and we still know so little about them. I mean, we know much more than we knew maybe 100 years ago, because we also have instruments so we can see them. We have lots of techniques that we can analyze them, but there is still a lot of unknowns. in this
Of course, and as you
sphere.
said, we need more people, and we need people with different backgrounds. You're a chemist, I was a chemical engineer, now I'm working in biology and in medical sciences and bioengineering. So we need people with different backgrounds. Sarah is a neuroscientist who was talking to us before. So we need all to work together to try to find out more about these microbes. Maybe there are enzymes and microbes, types of microbes that we don't know yet. We need to find techniques to use them in the lab and see what we can do.
Exactly. And so we don't know what kind of richness of the reactions is happening there. So I also have friends who's an artist, and she started working with the microbes as well to make special drinks and special yogurts, because you can also make different delicious yogurts with the help of the microbes. So, you know, anybody can actually study them a little bit. If not in the lab, then in the kitchen. And I'm just looking at my reaction here, and the bottle is still warm. And that actually means sometimes these molecular chemists, in order to do these reactions, they need energy. Sometimes they take the energy from the environment, or you need to heat up the reaction to happen. But some reactions release the energy. And this is what we need in our body. So in our cells, the food that we are eating is basically giving us energy to learn the things, to play, to have a walk, or maybe just sit and watch the TV, because we still need to process the things. We need energy for all of these things. And so this reaction, which I've done with the yeast, heats up the bottle, which means that basically the energy is released. So you can imagine how much energy you can release within your cells with a tiny bit of these enzymes. It's a lot.
There are trillions of them on our bodies. Yeah.
Yes.
That. All
So
the
we
energy.
need to be, so we need to be nice to our microbes. So what do we know, Auntie, and Sarah is here as well. So what do we know about the impact of food on our brain, on our thinking, on our learning?
So this the gut-brain axis communication, and particularly, as you said, how diet affects the brain is a very vibrant research field. We're still trying to find out a lot about it. There are studies that show that some types of food are beneficial for our health, not only for a healthy gut microbiome, like the apricot you're eating, exactly, fibers and fruits and vegetables and everything, but keeping the gut healthy means you keep the brain healthy as well, because there are several potential routes of communication. So these microbes, because rely on our food, on what we eat, on the choices of our food, they will produce enzymes and molecules according to what we feed them. So if we take care of them and feed them with fiber, with vegetables, with good healthy protein, they will produce these nice molecules that will travel through the bloodstream, or will signal the brain through the nervous system, the enteric nervous system and the central nervous system, and give some signals to the brain, and then the brain has to respond. So there are studies that show that some types of food help us to fight stress and anxiety, that some types of food are helpful for depression. Serotonin, for example, is known to have an effect for our brain.
But Auntie, I also feel very happy when I eat ice cream. So, sure. You know, I'm allowed also to eat a little bit of sugars and ice cream for now and then.
We need that as well. But as we talked about before, we have to be careful of the amounts of these types of food that we eat. We have to keep a balance on our diet, on our choices. And yeah, I wanted us today to just stop and have a think why I eat what I eat. Can I change a bit my choices of diet and shift to something healthier? As a researcher on this field as well, there are moments that I find myself thinking, okay, I need to eat ice cream or I need to eat chocolate, but is it me who's craving the chocolate, or is it the microbes in my gut that send a signal to the brain? But let us not forget that it's not as simple like the gut and the brain. We also have genes, and we have a genetic background that impacts our food choices and the food intake. It's very complicated, but we are a strong community and we're working towards finding the answers, and sharing this with people like today is very important.
I agree. And just to tell you all, for us, of course, chemists, is very important to work together with a scientist like Antti, because we learn from these scientists a little bit more about the complexity and diversity of all of the microorganisms and reactions that they can do. And then sometimes we go and talk to Antti and ask her, do you have something interesting? Like, did you find an interesting microbe that does a particularly interesting reaction? And if she tells us, yes, there is something really cool, we might go and look into the molecular, really tiny bits and pieces of this microbe as well to see
and
what
it
can
works
we
both
learn.
ways. You tell us more about these molecules that we have found, exploring their structure, their properties, if they're stable in some reactions, if they can do more reactions that we know of. So we have to work as a team.
Absolutely. And also in chemical engineering department, we also have other researchers. So we have people who are designing new types of drugs. For example, when there is a particular illness and we would like to cure it, we can, try to see how can we design the drugs and deal with this. But we also have engineers, chemical engineers. You are also a chemical engineer, that help us deal with certain issues, like a little bit of climate change or some other challenges as well. So it's a very diverse community of people. And as you said, it's very important to work together as a team.
We need new tools to study chemistry and microbiology and human body. We need new tools to study all these. And we also have people who work a lot with microscopes and building very powerful microscopes for us to use.
Yes.
People go even deeper and study molecules in our cells and interactions of these molecules with the membrane of the cells, build new tools to see how microbes interact with the human body, and they can be harmful or not, and find all these answers that can help us produce new drugs, can help us treat all these challenges in the world today.
I am just preparing a new experiment because I realized I have some yeast left and I don't want it to go to waste. So I will just do one more thing. I love this kitchen experiment. So this is something that as a chemist, you really feel you always need to mix something. And so if you can't mix it in the lab, you usually mix it in the pot. So make some food. Do you also cook at home a lot?
Yeah, I do. I do experiments at home. I call them baking.
Ah, the baking, where we also can use different types of ingredients. I particularly like pies because you can combine lots of fruit with a little bit of fiber, so you can have a combination of both.
Yeah,
so let me see.
Find new recipes, find better ways to use your little chemists in these recipes. Okay, let's see, what's that?
Let's see, I actually need to, I'm thinking this is going to be a huge reaction because I'm going to put all of the remaining yeast, which I have, in the water. And I will pour it quickly, and it's coming. Whoa! Look at this, it's fuming.
That's impressive. What do we do in the kitchen? Imagine you in the lab.
I know, and it's actually really heating up. So I can feel the steam going out of the bottle. because the reaction is so quick. So it's steaming hot. So I have to be careful not to touch it. And these bubbles which are produced, these are actually oxygen. So there is nothing dangerous being produced in this reaction, but water and oxygen. So what the enzyme, this molecular chemist is doing is taking one molecule and just simply cutting it into two pieces. And these pieces are water and the oxygen that we breathe. So yeah, these are my favorite reactions where you don't get anything dangerous. So,
It's very impressive to look at, right?
it is, and it's a lot of fun. And, I like to keep myself entertained and also my neighbors sometimes. So I would definitely encourage everybody to read a little bit about enzymes. You go on Google and you type enzymes, and then you will discover a wonderful world of this really, really nice chemists. So what I really wanted to hear also from our audience, and they can always write us through email, or they can get in touch through other means. I would like them to tell us a little bit more. What do they think about scientists? How do they, when you mention the word scientist, what do you think about? When I was a kid, I always imagined these people in the white lab coats with the safety goggles, being locked up somewhere in the lab, doing all kinds of really mysterious experiments, because this is what I kind of saw in the books. But, how do scientists look like today, Auntie? When you look around.
Look like you and me, and everyone around us can be a scientist if they want to. So they look like normal people, I guess.
Absolutely. And as I said, we sometimes have in the department artists coming, or even writers who are collecting some ideas for some stories. We even had some filmmakers coming, making the movies and collecting the ideas for this. And we sometimes do experiments with them. I have a friend another friend who's an artist, and he's one of the best biologists that I know. So he works in the lab and performs the experiment, and sometimes he sends me little descriptions of the experiments he has done. And it's fun to explore. And I think we need to explore as much as we can. And in order to explore, we need to have a very active brain. And in order to have a very active brain, we need to eat well. And we need to give to our brain whatever it needs. And in order to eat well, we need to also keep our molecular chemists really healthy as well. So this is what I wanted to close with.
A great message. I couldn't agree more with you. I don't know if Sarah is here and wants to share something before we leave the audience.
I'm still here, yes. Hello.
Sarah was listening to us rambling about the microbes and enzymes all the time.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to, again, highlight the point Anthony made, about how our diet can influence our brain activity. And I think there's a lot of communication that goes on between our gut and our brain. And so, yeah, to have a healthy mind, we need to have a balanced, healthy diet. And yeah, again, focusing on the balance part, it's okay to have some chocolate or some ice cream every now and then to keep ourselves happy, but to also have all the good things as well. So yeah, I think happy mind, happy gut, happy body.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I am definitely going to have a little bit of ice cream after this, but then I will also go for a walk, so that, all of the sugars that I eat with my ice cream can be then turned into a good positive energy. So, so this is what is, I think, very important. And I really, really hope that there will be somebody from our audience today who will join us you know, maybe in a few years, and join us in the lab, working on all of these things and
Why
talking
not?
about,
Maybe they
yeah,
have ideas for experiments. We are all
if,
ears.
exactly. If you have any ideas for experiments, if you would like to see something, if you would like us to help you do something, then of course, just write to us and we will see what we can do. You know, sometimes we have some clever tricks in our sleeves. So we can help do an interesting experiment for you, maybe online. So that will be, so stay tuned. And of course, whenever we are going to be again in the lab and we will organize the visits, you can all come when we have open days to see us also live when we perform some experiments as well.
Absolutely. It was great. Thank you all.